Welcome to the Internet of Things Weather Station Assembly Guide. In this video, we are going to walk through a step-by-step process guiding you as you assemble your IoT weather station. Before we begin assembling our base station, let's go through all the components we have. First, we have this orb housing. This is going to house the microcontroller and most of the wiring components. You'll notice there's 4 threaded entry ports into this orb housing, which we'll use to attach all of the other components. Next, we have this vented lid and a base with a gap at the bottom, which will go together to form the air quality monitor housing. The threaded portion here will screw into our base. In addition to that, we have the radiation shield, which will hold our monitor for things like temperature, humidity, and air pressure. You'll notice that there's a lot of holes at the bottom or from underneath so that you can see a lot of air will be able to circulate and get through so the heat doesn't get trapped. But from the top, it has covering so that it doesn't get permeated by rain. We also have this vented cap for the bottom, which is open so that we can create a sealed environment. The threading will also go into the orb. In addition to that, you might notice that our rain gauge has a plastic base already that doesn't have threading. So we have this component here, which we will attach to the rain gauge so that it can screw into our orb housing. In addition to that, we have these parts here, which will house the UV sensor. This has a hole here so sunlight can get through, and this base allows the UV monitor to lock into place and then go into this T PVC pipe fitting. And we will have a PVC pipe here so that it can attach to the main base station. In order to attach PVC, you might notice doesn't have threading, so we have this adapter piece. This part can hold PVC, and this part is threaded. So that is all of our 3D printed and plastic components going into this. To go over our sensors and microcontrollers, we'll first talk about the air quality sensor. You might notice that this air quality sensor has a blue base and a small gap here with a fan inside, and that is how it pulls in the air to measure the air quality. We also have the LTR390, which is a UV light sensor, and that is what's going to go into this housing here. Then we have the BME680, which is going to measure the temperature, pressure, humidity, and that will go into this housing here, as I mentioned. And then here we have the microcontroller, which is the computer that will be running this entire system and what everything will connect to. And I already mentioned the rain gauge. This will measure how much rain is falling from the sky by what lands on this top part here. To connect all of these pieces, we're going to need wires and a Qwiic connection. So this is our Qwiic link. We'll be able to connect a lot of different sensors into here, and then this will connect into the microcontroller. We also have a variety of wires. So we have this wire here with 4 connection points that these ones won't have wires sticking out of them. They kind of look like tubes at the ends, and I'll have this white connecting point here. Then we have this one, which does have wires coming out, and it will have a connection on the other side. And then we have 3 that are just the simple connection points on either side. These will connect to most of our sensors, and you might notice they're different lengths. Different lengths are better for different sensors in the configuration, even though they all have the same ending. So be mindful of the lengths of each of these. In addition, we'll need a battery so you can test that our components are working properly. We'll need a USB-C to USB cord to connect our battery to our microcontroller. And we'll need a screwdriver, a Phillips head screwdriver. Finally, you may notice a tiny little lens-looking thing right here. This will go over the hole in the UV sensor so that rain can't fall onto the computer device inside. So we'll put that there. Now that we've gone over all of our sensors, let's go ahead and start building. To begin, we should test that all of our sensors and microcontroller are working properly. To begin, we'll test the microcontroller. So we will use this here microcontroller, and we'll need a battery with charge or any power source and the proper cord. So I'll be using a USB-C to a USB. We can plug the USB-C end into the USB-C cord and then plug that into our battery with no sensors attached. If everything's working properly, the light will begin to blink red on our microcontroller. That means that our microcontroller is working and no sensors are attached. So now that we know that our microcontroller is functioning, we can move forward. To move forward, let's make sure that all of our sensors are working. So we're going to begin by connecting all sensors to the microcontroller. We'll start with the rain gauge because this is the most complicated one to attach. To begin, we'll need to take off this base because we'll need to add our own 3D printed base to it. So go ahead and unscrew all 4 screws on the bottom. Once all 4 screws are out, gently lift off the housing, and you might notice a silica packet here. You can go ahead and take that out. Once you have all the wiring in, if you decide that there's space for it, then you could include it. This basically absorbs any water that gets into the sensor. So if you think that you might get some rain inside and you're worried about the computer parts, you could keep this in. But for the sake of this video, we're going to go ahead and take it out. Now, you'll notice there's an array of 8 pins at the bottom here. These are the pins we're going to use to connect our wiring, and we have to connect the wiring before we screw this on, because once this is on, we won't be able to access this anymore. So, the wire you're going to need is this. It is the one with the 4 tube-like endings that are all disconnected from one another, going into one united port. Now to plug this in, we're going to need to be very aware of what colors we're plugging into which parts. So we will need the black ends going into the bottom left wire, which has a G to the left of it. This is our ground cable. Then we will take our red wire and plug it into the one just above that, the top left with a V above it. This provides power. Then we will take our yellow wire and plug it in one to the right of the red wire. It has an S above it, S0. And then we will take our last white wire and plug it in to the 3rd pin on the bottom. You might notice that the computer board inside can come loose. That's okay. If that happens, go ahead and just put it back on and make sure that the 4 holes that will hold the screws line up with the 4 screw threadings in the housing. Now that that's wired, we can go ahead and work on our other sensors. First, let's take the temperature, pressure, and humidity sensor and plug in our shortest connector. This one doesn't have very far to go from its housing into the center of the orb, which is why we're using the shortest cord. Next, let's take the medium cord and we're going to plug that in to the air quality sensor, which is this blue one with the fan on the side. It's the biggest sensor. And so you can go ahead and plug that in on either side. If If it isn't fitting, try flipping it the other way, or try the port on the other side so you can get it a nice secure connection. Make sure to push it in pretty hard. Now we'll take the UV sensor and we're going to plug in the longest cord. This one will have the longest ways to go once it's in the housing, which is why it needs the longest cord. So now we have our UV, temperature, pressure, and humidity, and air quality sensor all wired in addition to our rain gauge. So that leaves wiring to the microcontroller. The microcontroller, you'll notice, has one side with 4 holes and one side with more. We're going to focus on the side with 4 holes, and we're going to use the wire that has one quick connection here and 4 disconnected wires on the other side. This is another instance where it's very important to pay attention to which color wire is going where. First, we'll begin with our black wire again. Our black wire will go into the bottom of the 4 ports when the text is facing towards you in the most readable way. Next, we will plug in our red cord. Next, we need our blue wire for the one above it. And the yellow wire will go into the very top. Now we have our microcontroller wired. Now you'll notice none of these are communicating with one another right now because everything is plugged into only one electronic. Now in order to fix that and make everything more connected, we're going to go ahead and use this Qwiic connector, which has 4 different ports so we can connect lots of things together. Go ahead and start plugging in your cords. So I just started with the UV. Now I'm plugging in the air quality sensor. Now I'm plugging in temperature, pressure, and humidity. Make sure you get these pretty snug. And then last, I'm going to plug in the microcontroller. You'll notice that now that all 4 of these are connected, we still don't have the rain gauge connected. And it does have a different port that wouldn't fit inside of this. But I can go straight into the microcontroller. There's a USB-C port, and then on the other, just across the USB-C port, there's 4 pins sticking out in a little white plastic part. We're going to go ahead and plug this into that, making sure it's really snug. And now everything is connected. To test everything's working now, we'll take our battery, plug in the USB, like so. Once we have our USB plugged into our power source, we're going to go ahead and plug in the USB-C, and we're looking for blue flashes. If we get blue flashes when we plug this in, that means everything is working properly. So let's keep an eye out, and I just got some blue flashes. So that's great. That means that everything is working, and we can go ahead and start putting our sensors and wiring into the plastic housing. Let's start by unplugging the rain gauge, because we're not going to be able to get our rain gauge housing on very well if it's still attached. In order to get it off, it can be a bit tricky, but there's a tab on the back where if you pinch down, it's sort of like an alligator, and it will open its mouth, and then you can pull it off. If you just try to pull it straight off, it will be too secure. So remember to pinch the back, open the alligator mouth, and pull it off. Now we're going to go ahead and put our rain gauge base on. So go ahead and slide it over the cord, feeding the cord through the middle. and line it up with the 4 screw holes that are already in the board and the rest of the housing. This might take a little bit of trial and error, but take a little time and you'll get it. And then we'll go ahead and take these 4 screws we took out of the existing base and put them inside and go ahead and screw that down. Okay, now our rain gauge is wired and it has the proper base for our weather station. So you can go ahead and put this to the side for now and work on other parts. Next, let's put the air quality sensor into its container. You'll notice that if you put the base, which has a small cutout at the bottom, with the lid, which has a small cutout on the vented part, there's a gap at the bottom. That allows adequate airflow in addition to these so that the air quality sensor can reach the air it's trying to measure. So let's go ahead and unplug the air quality sensor from the Qwiic connection, but leave the wiring directly to the sensor. Now be careful to look for the fan. Remember, it's going to be this small black box, and it'll have kind of a space where you can kind of fit your finger there. That's how you know you're in the right place. If it's completely smooth, then you're not. So feel for the gap and look for the fan. And we're going to put that part on the bottom where we know that our venting will be. So go ahead and feed the wire through the threading, like so. And then make sure that fan is facing the bottom of the housing. Once you have that wire fed through and you're sure the fan is facing the bottom of the housing, we can go ahead and add in our top. This is a screw-on piece. So now just go ahead and screw it on. Okay, now you'll see we have our air quality sensor with the fan at the bottom and this wiring coming at the back. We'll set that to the side now that that's in its proper housing. Let's go ahead and work on the radiation shield. Let's start by taking this vented cap and screwing it into the bottom of the radiation shield. Sometimes you have to make sure that these are lined up really well. Since they're 3D printed threading, they can be a little bit more finicky, but it should fit. And our BME 680 is a sensor that will fit into here. So I'm just going to go ahead and lay that coming out the top so that we can keep track of where each sensor belongs. Finally, now that we have our radiation shields, our rain gauge, and our air quality sensors in their proper housing, let's go ahead and work on the UV sensor. Remember, this is a multi-part piece. So let's go ahead and unplug our sensor from this Qwiic connection port, but leave it wired. And we're going to go ahead and take our cap and put it into the housing. Now be careful that the part that has all a lot more detail, computer parts, whatnot, this side is the side that you want to go up because right in the middle is the sensor. If you put the back side up, then the sensor will be facing inside of the UV housing and I won't be able to actually see the UV. So make sure you're going to put the more complicated part facing outwards through the hole. And there's some shape inside of there that can help hold it. Once you have that in, you're going to feed the wire through the base to bring it through, and then go ahead and screw it on. So now it should feel very secure even if you tug on the wire. It's not moving around. And this hole at the top, you can kind of see the computery bits inside. Once that's complete, we'll take our PVC T-pipe joints and we're going to feed our wire through the top of it out of one of the sides. It doesn't really matter which side. And then we will sit the base inside of the PVC, make sure that's nice and secure, and have the wire coming out the side. Then you can go ahead and take a small PVC pipe and pull that through. The reason we're having to use this is because in order for the UV sensor to access enough light, we don't want it to be obstructed by the base station with the orb and the other sensors. So this is going to sit a little bit off to the side so that it has full access to the sun. Now we're going to need this piece here to feed through the wire again and attach to the other end of the PVC pipe. This is what makes it so this part of the station can be screwed into place. Finally, we'll take our lens and remove anything that covers it, and we'll stick that over the top. If you find that it's not secure enough, you might need to use hot glue or some other sort of adhesive to make sure that stays in place, but it is important that it's there so that rain doesn't just get inside and sit on top of the UV sensor and nothing can block it. Okay, now I'm going to clear the space except for what we're going to need now. So we don't need our screwdriver anymore, this base or the silica packet. So this is everything we will need to finish off our station. We have the UV sensor inside of its housing, the air quality sensor inside of its housing, the rain gauge inside of its housing. We have the microcontroller properly wired, and then we have the radiation shield and its sensors separated for now, but you'll see why that is later. This will be the last piece to the puzzle when we're finishing. So, to get started with final assembly, which is the step we're on, we're going to take our orb and we're going to find the top, so you can look at the text on it to find the top. And we're going to feed our rain gauge wire from the top all the way through the bottom hole. So let's go ahead and do that. Sometimes you might have to fish around a little bit, that's all right, take your time. And then once that's on, I'm going to go ahead and twist on the housing, and the wire is going to fly around a little, that's totally fine. And now we have our rain gauge as our first sensor attached, and it comes out the bottom. Now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with our air quality sensor. Now remember how there's a vent here and a hole at the bottom? We're going to want to make sure this section is at the bottom so that it looks like this from the side. So if you tighten it all the way and maybe it's up like that, go ahead and untighten it until this is at the bottom. That way we don't get any rain going inside. And we're also going to feed this in through the side and take the wire out through the bottom and then line it up with the threading and go ahead and twist it, and the wire is probably going to jump around a little. That's totally fine. And now that's as tight as it can go with this part being at the bottom. So there we go. I could keep tightening it, but I don't want it to sit like that because rain could get in and all kinds of other debris. So we're going to keep that facing down. And now we have our air quality wire here and our rain gauge wire here. Next, we're going to go ahead and do the same with the UV sensor. We're going to take this wire and we're going to feed it in through the side and out through the bottom like this. Go ahead and line up the threads, and then we're going to twist this into place. I'm just holding on to the PVC here and twisting this because I have a looser fit. If you have a tighter fit, then you might have to spin the whole thing around. Either way, that's perfectly fine. The end goal is just to have a tight threading with the UV sensor here and the wire coming out the bottom. Now we're going to go ahead and work on, actually we're not going to do the microcontroller yet, we're going to do our power cord. So we're going to have a USB on this side and the USB-C on this side. The USB-C, if you remember from our testing, is the side that's going to go into the microcontroller. So that means we should feed this in first. So you might have to go ahead and step this all the way up. You can actually see all the way through to the air quality sensor if you look closely. We're going to go ahead and feed this through the tube. This one might take a little bit more fishing and finagling. So go ahead and take your time with it and just make sure you get that USB-C coming out the bottom. Okay. Once you have that coming out the bottom, we will leave the rest of this cord coming out the side. We just need a little bit poking out the bottom. Again, here's our UV wire. It's not critical you know what each wire is at this point. This is our air quality and this is our rain gauge. If you got the wires a little bit mixed up, it's not a big deal. You don't necessarily need to know what's what at this point because you already made sure everything was in its right place. Now we're going to go ahead and do our wiring into the Qwiic controller or Qwiic connector here and the microcontroller for the power and the rain gauge. The rain gauge will go in right here and the power is going to go in right there. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the rain gauge. It can be a little tricky to get the rain gauge connector in if you already have plugged in the USB-C power. So my tip is to go ahead and do the rain gauge first. If you can make it work the other way, that's totally fine. And then I'm going to plug in my USB-C power. All right, and that just leaves these two wires still sticking out. We have the air quality wire, which I'm going to go ahead and plug into the Qwiic connection port. And the same with the UV sensor wire. And if you don't know exactly what's what, it's not a big deal. It doesn't matter where in this connection each of the parts go, it just matters that they go in. And make sure you get tight fit, push it in pretty well. And now we have everything wired except for our BME 680 piece, which is again the temperature, pressure, humidity, and gas. So we're going to go ahead and attach this last sensor into our Qwiic connection, but make sure you keep track of this one because our next step is to push all of these wires inside of the housing, but you don't want this one to go in. So make sure this one stays out while the rest get pushed inside. You might need to tug on your power cable a little to help get your microcontroller in. And it takes a little bit of finagling, wiggling, and pushing, but this doesn't need to be super neat because you already, I hope, made sure that everything is a super tight connection. So it's not super important to make this neat. Just go ahead and push everything inside. Stopping before the BME 680 goes in. Oh, my UV got a little disconnected, that's fine. All right, once we have all of the wires inside, it's time to screw on our radiation shield with its vented end cap. So go ahead and put this sensor inside of there and line it up, screw it in. And that is our base module for the OpenIoT weather station. If you want to do a last test to make sure everything's in working order, you can go ahead and take your power source and plug in your USB ports, and you should see some things lighting up here. So I can see a green light here, a green light here. I can see a little green light coming through up here. If you turn the lights off, that's the best way to really see all of the glows. So now I've gone ahead and dimmed the room a little bit just so you can see a little bit better what I'm talking about with the glows. Here you can see the green glows coming from the BME 680 and the air quality monitor. You can also see the top of this is glowing a little bit. That's our UV detection. You might be able to see the orb glowing some. Mine is glowing red. There's some wires, so it might not show up super well. But that is how you know that everything is in good working order. And interestingly, at night, this is what your station is going to look like. You'll actually be able to see the glow of the different sensors at night as they transmit data. But nicely done. You have now completed the configuration and assembly of your core Internet of Things weather station. And now we'll go towards setting up the details like solar panels, Wi-Fi, whatever is needed to actually get it fully deployed into the field.